just introduce this topic with a few ideas, and then I can share some of my thoughts and dogma, and I will probably disagree with Rick a little bit, and we can discuss as a group. So, first point, getting the right tools really matters. If you live in a world where everybody else is using chainsaws, it's going to be hard to get by with a hand axe, right? You may be able to chip away at the problem, but you will not be as effective as anybody else. Yeah,
that's bad, even.
I just thought of that. I don't do premeditated fun. This matters, but we almost never talk about it. At least, like I said earlier, I've never had anybody tell me this is the right way to think about picking software, picking tools. And yet, I'm in a discipline where people use all kinds of different statistical and a little bit of computational and all kinds of different methodologies. And people basically say, we have to pick the right tool for the problem. And then kind of leave you there. And I don't know, I found that advice helpful, but wanted a lot more. Another point, and I think this is maybe new and different, but especially with software, this is a decision that I've found myself facing over and over and over again. It's not as if I came in, I learned a trade, I learned how to run a printing press or something, and then that's what I'm going to do for 40 years. Software is going to keep moving forward. The kinds of tools that we use for science are developing really rapidly, and so whatever you're using right now is going to be a hand axe in 10 years, probably. Now, a lot of the skills that you learn will transfer and be useful later, but the tools are getting better and better and better, and knowing how to keep up with that in an intelligent way, I think is a really valuable skill. Sometimes people talk in education policy about learning how to learn. I think this is a very good example of what it means to learn how to learn.
Hey, can I just say one thing, which is a bit on the other side. If the software you've got is adequate to your needs, then you can waste a lot of time learning the latest thing. I mean,
Yes.
there's really a decision in both directions there. It's if it runs fast enough, then there's no use to go to Racket if you could get it with some earlier object-oriented programming language or something like that. It's just, this is the same old story that we all face all the time. When do I get a new computer? When do I, all that kind of stuff. But it's important to not get driven by just the latest technology.
Yeah, one thing that I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about is the human side of this.
Yeah.
So how you may have code that is beautiful and runs blindingly fast, but if it's impossible to interpret or debug, that's no good, right? So there's, those realistic concerns need to weigh on these decisions a lot. So I want to compare this with another decision that we've all faced. The decision is, what do I wear to the thing, right? So there's going to be a job interview, or a prom, or a moon landing, or a trip to meet the Wizard of Oz, right? And depending on what the thing is, what you want to wear is going to be very different. So, no. Just wear this one and you're safe no matter what. What's that?
I think Thoreau said he's suspicious of any job that encourages you to buy new clothes.
Well, okay. I mean, you can make the decision go the other way, right? It can be based on the job we will choose the clothes, or it can be based on the clothes we will choose the job.
You could talk to Scott about this. He's going to Davos, which is the World Economic Forum, which has all sorts of prime ministers and everything else. What do you wear when you're going to a place like that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Hint, not that.
Yeah, probably not. Although you'd be better off with that than the jeans with the open shirt. Then they just think you're odd.
Yeah, you go for a kind of eccentric genius rather than slacker. Yeah. So it matters. And I want to talk about software in these terms because I think most of us have faced this decision and thought about it a little bit. Most of us, when we approach software, at least I've often found myself just sort of grabbing the first thing that comes to mind, like dig into the back of the closet and grab that striped thing I haven't seen in a long time. That's a bad way to make this decision. So if you had an event you're planning for, unspecified, dance, moon landing, whatever, what would you take into consideration when you're choosing what to wear to that.
We're talking about, using this to talk about software specifically, I would, because I don't think it would work as well in a real situation, but I would research and find out what generally other people do at such a thing.
Yeah.
If there's already an established
Yeah, so
accepted thing.
let's scribble these down, just to get ideas going. So what's the norm? What's popular? Is this right?
Yeah.
What's expected? What else? What else would you think about? This would weigh very heavily on my mind.
What do I have already?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
This is what John was saying. What have I already got in the closet?
What functions, like if it's a moon landing, it better work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Some things are more critical than others. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to wear clothes that will make you explode, right? It better work.
Depends on what you're trying to do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you're right. You're
Do
right.
you want to explode? Here.
You're a suicide bomber? Why?
It better explode.
Is there a
Otherwise, I'll end up on the
Days,
floor
yeah,
being beat
yeah.
up by a Scottish guy, right?
Yeah.
Is there a tailor in my neighborhood? I might have something that can be modified to suit the purpose. I don't have to go out and buy the whole new. I have a suit, but I can add something to it.
Yeah.
I have some software that
Can it be
extended.
customized? I thought of this as accessorizing, right? Do I have a purse that goes great with this thing?
I don't need a whole new system if you can.
I don't, by the way. But
That's very disappointed. I highly recommend that.
Extensible or some way where you can combine things.
Uh-huh.
Like how many times do you expect to go to a similar thing in the future?
Yeah.
Reusability, yeah.
Yeah.
So nobody said one that.
So, I was just going to say, for those of us who are married, does your wife think it's acceptable?
Uh-huh. And if she's going too, does it sort of work with what she's wearing?
Right.
So my wife has this pet peeve about clashing colors. If she's wearing something that's blue, I better wear either exactly the same blue or no blue at all.
Right.
Right?
I think it's a wife thing, not just your wife.
My husband's wife is really awesome.
Your husband's wife doesn't care.
Well, there are these outside criteria. For instance, if you're at the University of Michigan, your wife is wearing blue, you got to wear yellow.
Yeah,
True.
yeah. There's
You gotta
sort
sing.
of a larger language you have to speak. Yeah, you got to sing. Nobody's mentioned one that I think about a lot, which is sort of unfortunate sometimes. Is it comfortable? Like, tuxedos are not that comfortable. But sometimes you've got to do it. But if you don't have to wear the tuxedo, then maybe, Anyway, so I often end up being that guy who is over on the left, who's dressed down just a little bit more than you need to be, because I care about comfort. There are other things we could put on the list, but I think this is a pretty good list, the sorts of things that you care about when you are choosing clothes.
We didn't talk about money.
Oh, yeah.
If I could,
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
could
Are you
shop
gonna
at Calvin
break the
Klein,
bank?
I would look like that guy all the time.
Right. Or just wear the moon landing suit,
Right.
right? $1.2 million, but hey, works for every occasion.
Yeah.
Anonymity, if nothing else, right? Close the map. So I think I misspelled accessorize as well there. These are not all of the things we've talked about, but they cover most of them. If you want to put on your analogizing hats, you can probably take some of these other things and figure out analogous things for software. But here are some questions you should ask yourself when you look at a new software package. So we talked about tailoring and accessorizing. Does it work well with the things that you already know how to do? So if you already know Java, does this new statistical language that you're learning, does it play nice with Java? Are there APIs to interface between them? Can you talk back and forth easily? One thing to be alert to on all of these questions is almost all programming languages these days are fully, they do complete computation in the Turing sense. So it's possible to do anything in any language. The real question is it difficult? So does there already exist a library to do that thing that you want to do, or would you have to build it from scratch? You can build it from scratch. That's possible. It's just going to take you the next 3 years. So when we say all of these questions are not binary, they're really about how easy is it to do this.
Hey, I think I'm out of date. What proportion of programming languages now do you think allow self-reference so that you can change instructions within the with some other instructions?
Just thinking down, so I put together a list of the languages I use. Almost all of them allow self-reference.
Okay. 'Cause that
Some
used
of them
to
are
be not
better
the
at it than
case.
others, right? Like
Yeah.
assembly, very easy to do.
Yeah.
Very easy to do. JavaScript, you can do it, but it's a little bit complicated. Most languages allow it, though.
Okay.
I don't know. Does Java allow self-reference? Can you like edit your own code on the fly programmatically? Yeah. Okay.
It would theoretically be possible. Yeah. I mean, it would be hard.
Yeah. So again, some languages are better at it than others. I'm going to guess that compiled languages are going to be worse at that, and interpreted languages are going to be better.
Yeah.
Taking up on it.
That's certainly my experience, yeah.
Okay. So is it extensible? Is it going to play nice with the package of other things that you already use? Another one, maybe the most important, second most important, is it popular? The nice thing about a popular language is, one, there are people out there who can give you help if you need it. So if you get stuck, there will be an online forum where people are talking about that, where they've run into that same problem previously. Also, more people tends to mean that all the rough edges have been worked off of things, especially for open source problems. People find a pain point in the process, there are Ps, and they fix it, right? They say, it's really hard to take this kind of database and migrate it to that format, so I'm going to write a package that does that for me automatically, and then share that package. So popular packages tend to just have more of those rough edges worn off, especially once they're well developed. So if it's really cutting edge and a new thing, maybe not yet, but in that case, it's probably not popular yet. Comfortable, this matters a lot here. So is the software well documented, and is it easy to debug? Some programs or programming languages have a reputation for being difficult to debug. So JavaScript, for example, is notoriously difficult. I'd say no more there, but
Going back to managed others, you mentioned forums, but also just somebody down the hall.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice if you were in a community where you can just say, hey, Fred, I can't debug this thing. What happens here, right? And he says, oh, you need to use double quotes instead of single quotes. It's really nice when you can kick those questions back to somebody rapidly. Pricing. We didn't talk about this up on the board, but pricing matters. It turns out that a lot of the best software now is open source. Not for everything, but there are a lot of really good open source packages. In some cases, they're actually better than the paid packages. And failing that, the university has licenses to a lot of things, like MATLAB. And so you can use, at least while you're a student, you can use professional tools for free sometimes. And then the last one, which we talked about, does it fit the occasion? Does this programming package do what you want it to do? And does it really do what you want it to do? I found that it's often useful when you come to this question to stop and slow down and try and make a list that feels ridiculously detailed, like just too much detail, about what you need the software to do. So, common trap, for example, I'm going to build an agent-based model to do this thing. And it's going to have these kinds of agents and these kinds of things. And if you go through that exercise quickly, you'll probably come to the conclusion that any software will work, because agent-based modeling isn't that crazy difficult. But if you stop and think about it, at the end of the day, you might discover, I need to put in tuning parameters, and I need to tune them quickly. And that means that on my screen, I want a little lever that I can pull to adjust the simulation. Now, all of a sudden, you're talking about building a graphical user interface, and some languages are much better at that than others. It's much easier in some places than others. So if you think through the details of what you really want it to do, that may change your decision. So I guess my main argument on these things is, here are some important questions. When you are looking at one of these decisions, realize that you're facing a decision about which software to adopt, and take an afternoon to make that decision. Stop, think about it, look around, see if there are forums on the web, see if other people are complaining about things. Just see if the different options make sense. It's worth spending a little bit of time up front in order to get this right. Now, like John said, you don't want to spend your whole life doing this. But when you know that you need to pick up a new package, it's worth stopping to think about it. Okay, now I'm going to go into personal dogma a little bit and just share packages that I use and a little bit about why I use them. And then I'm going to talk about packages that I have thought about using, and then I'm going to talk about packages that I would never use. And I'm hoping that this will spur some controversy and discussion, and we can talk about it. So for me, my workhorse is Python. Python is a interpreted programming language it's really powerful, and it's really clean code, and it does all kinds of things really well. I've like fallen in love with Python. After my wife and Ultimate Frisbee, it's like up there for love of my life.
But you should know, it's very hard to let go of.
Why do you get a dog? For statistics and data visualization, so basically when I have data and I want to show it to other people, when I want to communicate it in a way that isn't just rows and rows of numbers, I tend to use R. If you're getting R, you use and for those of you who use MATLAB, R is kind of the open source alternative. It's a little bit rougher around the edges, but it tends to have more packages sooner, in general. Depends on what you're doing, but in general, for the kinds of things I'm doing, that's RStudio is it's an IDE, it's an integrated development environment for R that puts all the pieces together. Basically, it saves you 10,000 copy pastes in a week. It lets you do everything in a number of windows that work together really nicely. And then ggplot is a package within R that does graphs and charts a little bit more slickly than R does itself. Just cruising through the rest of the list. Hadoop, if you want to do really big data crunching, you need to do something that's parallel, and Hadoop is kind of the cutting edge there. Occasionally, I need to build something to gather my own data on the web, and for that, I use Django, and then HTML, jQuery, and the stuff at the bottom. I think most people here are not doing web development, so that's less important. But I've discovered that sometimes it's nice to be able to build a platform that other people can interact with, just in a really easy way. And in that case, these kinds of tools come in handy. So those are tools I use: Python, R, and then a mix of other things depending on the task.
I would like just a kind of general opinion. I think many of the people use MATLAB for one purpose or another. How do you compare that to Mathematica?
That's a good question. I have a little experience with MATLAB and very little with Mathematica.
I mean, I would say MATLAB and Mathematica are good at very different things. Mathematica is basically a symbolic computation environment, so it's all about manipulating mathematical representations of things. MATLAB's good at crunching matrices, basically.
Oh, that's a distinction I really didn't realize.
Yeah. So MATLAB's really good if your computation is represented as matrix multiplication.
Yeah.
So if you want number crunching MATLAB, if you want to do integrals, or I mean, some people use Mathematica for everything, and some people use MATLAB for everything.
Yeah. That's the reason I was curious, because I know some people, often sees that people do one or the other, but they don't do both. Yeah, okay.
Different
That's
kind of
very
people.
helpful. No, the one property I know of Mathematica that I like is it's good at all kinds of string matching operations and that kind of stuff, so it manipulates strings pretty well.
Oh, by the way, this is a really good example of the thought process you go through when you're picking software packages. Okay, I don't think we need to dwell on these. These are other packages that I've thought about using. They sort of plug in and replace the things I already do. In most cases, I think these things would be better than the tools that I already use, but I don't know them yet, and there's a learning curve, and so I haven't gone there yet. So if I needed to do ABMs and do them really well, then I would probably invest the time to learn Repast. So far, I haven't had to do that, and so this is sort of on my downstream to-do list. At least for me, this is a healthy way of thinking about it. You keep your radar on for discovering new things that are emerging that might work for you, but don't pick it up the first time you see it. Wait until it seems useful 2 or 3 or 4 times, and then maybe make the decision to adopt. Okay, last, and this is the part where maybe Rick disagrees with me. Tools that I don't think I will ever use. Java. Now, there are legitimate reasons to use Java. So if you want to be able to go to the guy down the hall and ask questions, then Java is a great language to learn here. We're a community that's done a lot of Java. From my perspective, I do a little bit of C++ already. I used to do it a lot and just hadn't done it in a while. And I do a lot of Python. And between those two, there's nothing that Java does better. So for me, if I need to write scripts and get things done quickly, then I do it in Python. And if I need to compile and do something really efficiently, which I haven't had to do in a while, then I'd probably use C++. For me, there's just really no reason to go to Java at this point.
Fight!
Yeah, right.
Memory allocation.
The reason to go to Java is because there's packages for the Java that you want to use. So it's not just the frontline packages you have to think about. You have to think about what you want to use with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, Java, if you want to use repass, most of repass in Java is C++ repass. Python repass is you're not doing anything with it.
Really? Okay. I looked on a wiki and it said that they were doing it, but that's probably old information. So good to know. So if I were doing repass, maybe I would get pulled into Java. So.
Well, you might go to C++. They use the C++ repass for big scale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I mean, think about Java. A whole bunch of the base, not just repass, though. Basin and some other, a lot of stuff in Java.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe I said this up front. I don't think I'll likely use Java, but that's partly because I don't do a whole lot of ABMs. Maybe if I did, that would be a worthwhile decision. Possibly. I'm still skeptical, but it'd be worth looking into. Perl? Some people are diehard Perl fanatics. Yeah. Yeah. You can do Perl. And if you know it already, then that's great. If you want to write, so Perl just has really dense syntax. It lets you do the most possible things with the least possible keystrokes, which sounds really good, except that it's also traditionally thought of as tough to debug. Now, if you're already a ninja at it, then maybe that's not a problem.
You can use it with the monkeys at the typewriter.
You can't, but you can do the same thing in Python. NetLogo. So.
Perl, yeah. So you put your finger on exactly why I continue to use Perl. Not because I particularly like Perl. It's nice, it's dense.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to do Python, but every time I come to a job that I want to use Python, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I use Python for that. I already have something in Perl that almost does that.
Right.
So by the time I learned Python, I could have done the job 5 times. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, well, and
That's what happens to a lot of language stations.
yeah, no, and that's exactly the same for me. There are some things that Perl probably would be marginally better at than Python on these things. I mean, they're kind of interchangeable. They both do regular expressions well. But for me, I know Python, and so by the time I could learn Perl. So you make these decisions, and you kind of get locked into them long term. And in general, that's not a big deal. But occasionally it causes pain, so it's worth thinking about. The top two on this, I think of as personal choices. I happen to already know things that are good substitutes, and so you can switch. The bottom one, I really dislike NetLogo. I really dislike NetLogo. And it's not just a personal thing. NetLogo is based on Logo, which is, if you guys don't know, this is a language that was built as a programming tutorial for people using the Apple IIgs way back when, like way back when. And
For 6 years.
yeah. It was actually the first programming
Literally for 6 years.
the first programming language I was exposed to was going into a computer lab when I was a little bit older than 6. But you had to issue commands like turtle go forward, turtle turn right. And it's cool and it's cute, and I'm glad I had that experience, but it's not a power tool. It's a 20-year-old thing that we've just piled up more and more pieces on top of. NetLogo is really difficult. So the one time when I think it might be permissible to use NetLogo is if you're at a conference or something where everybody else is learning NetLogo, and you have an afternoon to throw something together very quickly, and you need sliders, and you want to modify the flocking module that's already built into it. So if you're doing something that NetLogo is already really good at, and you were never going to come back to that code, then maybe do it. But if you think that you're ever going to have to extend or debug or explain it to somebody else, just build it from scratch. You'll be better off.
I feel like I would like to see NetLogo re-implemented in the web browser using D3 or ProtoVis or something like that with JavaScript, because then
Yeah.
you could do something like NetLogo and have very simple simulations, but learn some skills that'll be relevant beyond NetLogo.
Yeah, I am totally with you on that. It seems like some of the new agent, well, do they have browser plugins for Repast or any of the other?
Not for pretty fast. I don't know about the other.
Okay. Yeah, the browser plugin is one thing that NetLogo does that's kind of nice. I think the reason why people keep using it in a lot of ways. But I'm really expecting NetLogo to be sort of the woolly mammoth that dies off before too long. It's really hard to use.
Is anyone still using
Use it.
Swarm?
Just
Some people
legacy,
use-
legacy.
Okay.
NetLogo's use is growing tremendously. There's new books about it. There's new books on it.
Yeah, I saw this when I did that survey last summer, and I was just shocked at how much NetLogo there was going on. What's that? Yeah. Well, so in my opinion, I suppose you can disagree with this, but NetLogo is a hand axe, and it can do some things, and it's popular, and it's not going to totally go away, but yeah, maybe it's a pedagogical thing. It'll stick around because it's easy to teach in some ways. I don't know. Anyway, it's the controversial part.
Well, I mean, it's definitely not a power tool. You wouldn't use it for something really big that you wanted to have like any particular thing about it be optimal. But it is kind of nice for if you want to okay, I want to sit here for an hour and throw together something that I can play with, you know. And so on the level of I don't want to necessarily go into I'm gonna have to get a bunch of packages together for Python to try and get this thing if I want to be tuning something in an easy way. So it's kind of nice for if you have a small project that you kind of want to fool around with and get a
No, I think that's so you've got 1 hour or a conference or something short. You want to throw it together and play around with it and interact with it. Yeah, NetLogo is good at that.
Yeah, for getting a feel for what's going on.
Yeah.
And if you've never done agent-based modeling, it's a good intro. It helps you think about, I've never thought about object-oriented programming. I've never thought about programming other than MATLAB before, and I think NetLogo was a great introduction for me. Actually, I disagree with you're afraid of programming. It actually has made me less scared of programming. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stand by the bad habit thing because NetLogo doesn't really.
I'm sure it has some really bad
I have a
habits.
question about this. Turtle languages, I do this
However, I've quickly found out that I need something bigger than NetLogo. So if you really are, I think that's one of those tools that you realize its limitations very quickly.
Okay, so maybe you think of it as it's like the Lego starter set that turns you into an engineer, right? You're not actually going to build cars out of Legos, but maybe you get your start there. Okay.
That's the big advantages. It's easy to play with database models without having to do all the installations. It's very simple. That's one of the biggest advantages. One download.
One of these days, I'm going to build the same thing in Python. Because it could be done. All the like you said, all the pieces are out there. You just need to put in the install dependencies and have it one
Do it in JavaScript. Do it so it runs in the browser without any.
You want it to run in the. Maybe you can have it compile the protobase. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if there's a Python library that does that. I'd have to look.
Sounds like a lot of
I think it would make a nice little Python package because then you would get rid of the terrible things that are terrible about it as a language, and because Python is in that way very nice.
So since we have 3 people that I know are crazy about Python in this room, could you guys say what it is exactly about Python that is so wonderful?
I'm probably the newest to Python of the people that are crazy about it. I picked it up last year after meaning to learn it for about 6 years. And I sort of did what Rick was saying in that I always had a go-to language that wasn't Python, so I'd always do it in that first.
Is it C++?
Which was, I never really had a good go-to scripting language, so the barrier was less for me to go to Python. But I'd write things in C or Java when I should have been writing them in, Perl or Python or something like that. But basically I find that Python enables you to program in whatever paradigm you want to, be it if the program makes sense just as a series of commands or function calls, then it works for that. If you want to do it in an object-oriented way, it works for that. And it handles all of these different paradigms in a fairly elegant way. And I don't know, it's the best balance I've seen between sort of practicality and efficient code and elegance and readability. I don't know, it just seems to strike a really nice balance between those two things. But
Yeah, one thing
I
I'd
don't
say
know.
to expand on the practicality and readability is that a lot of the readability features that you would do in any programming language, just as a matter of course, you know, doing indents and putting white space where white space needs to go so that it's readable, are things that Python uses as part of the syntax. So on the one hand, it forces you to do it, but on the other hand, it also makes use of the fact that you're going to do that already. So instead of having like extra brackets, then it's using indents to tell you what's a block. So you don't have to, so it kind of cuts out some of those other signals by saying, okay, well, I'm just going to assume you're writing code that humans can read and use that.
Yeah,
part
for
of
me,
the
the two things about Python are, first, it makes human-readable code. So when you see in like computer science textbooks, you'll see pseudocode where it says, if this, then do this loop, and then do it right. And they don't actually write out all the commands with all the parentheses and brackets and stuff, because that's confusing. That's actually what Python code looks like. If you write that out, it looks like pseudocode, and it works. Like you run your pseudocode. It's really slick. So that's one thing. The other thing that I really like about it, and this is the XKCD comic, is there are a million extensions for Python. There's a Python extension package that you can download with one click that does almost everything you want, unless you're an agent-based modeler. There isn't a huge support community there.
There's Syntax.
Mm.
It's not very developed yet.
Yeah. I mean, so
So that, what you just said, it's both a two-edged sword. It's both an advantage and disadvantage, having all those packages. Because immediately you get version control of the packages. So every time you try to use something, you're going to have to sort through, I've already got this version of this package, now it wants this other version.
So there's a Python tool for that works really well. Virtual environments and pip, the Python installer, take care of that. Yeah, they take care of all of that. So you create a virtual environment and you install whatever you want into that. And as long as it's in the cheese shop, which is the Python package index, like CRAN for R, you can install there directly. Most things are there. Sometimes you have to do a little customization to be really on the bleeding edge. But yeah, that tool is taken care of. So anyway, this is not like evangelical Python meeting. I just no. What I want to do here is basically put out an alternative to JavaScript or to Java, right? So we do a lot of Java and NetLogo, right? So if you're going to pick two languages, don't make them NetLogo in Java. Make them Java and Python.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I wouldn't put Java and Python at all in the same category.
No, they're different.
Yeah,
Java is
yeah.
compiled by, right, they do different sorts of things.
I know you've got to leave, but do you have time to talk about in what sense Pandas is a Python sort of replacement for R? Like what sort of things does it do?
So I don't know a whole lot about Pandas, which is why it's on my to learn list. But I have Vincent, a good friend in poli-sci, who has looked at this very seriously, and he's making the switch. And that's basically convinced me that I should look at this down the road. It's a Python package that does, according to him, I haven't looked into it in a lot of detail, matrix algebra and some pretty clean data manipulation stuff of the same sort of thing that R is good at, but of course you get Python syntax instead of R syntax, and one is better than the other there. And it's Python. So the other thing that I can do here is, last reason to learn Python, it begins with P, right? It fits the whole presentation. The whole thing is built up to this moment. So if you want to pick a powerful programming platform, think really hard about Python. And in terms of the guy down the hall, what's that?
Ponder Python?
Ponder Python, yeah. Yeah, Ponder Python and then ACT. Anyway, if you're looking for a guy down the hall, pursue it, yeah. I'm willing to be that guy. I'm willing to help support learning Python. I'm willing to help support learning anything. I just happen to be better at Python than most things. So, good alternative.
So the issue is, if you want to do agent-based modeling.
If you want to do agent-based modeling, then Python is probably not the right option for you. It depends on the nature of the model. But yeah, for most of the things that we do as ABMs, I'm willing to go with either. Java's probably a better option. But if you are, for example, generating lots of output from your JavaScript and you have these lines and lines and lines of data piling up on the server, Python's a really good option for parsing that. Python's really good at that kind of stuff. So yeah, like Ed said, in a lot of ways they're probably complementary.
They're the two I've been converging on.
If you really need fast code, then C++ might be better than Java. But again, you might be in trouble for ABMs. So I hope this is helpful. The punchline here is not Python. The punchline is there are principles to picking good programming languages, and you should think about these. This is a process that you'll do many times, and you should try and be good at it. This is part of what it's going to take to be a good scientist and a good knowledge worker. So think seriously about these, and at the end of the day, if you pick Java, I will still love you. It's okay.
What resources are there for learning Python? I mean, other than Googling about the internet?
So Googling about the internet is actually pretty good. There are a bunch of good O'Reilly books on Python, and the site stackoverflow.com is good for almost anything. Any popular language, you can go to Stack Overflow and ask your question. And then me, I'm happy to be resources on here.
He said it, my complex systems many questions today.
So just quick story on that. I wanted to see if you, like, since I hadn't looked at it in a while, if there were good ABM modules for Python. So I searched for voids, and it took me about 6 minutes to have voids running on my computer. I had to find the script, I had to download it to my desktop. It needed one extension, so I downloaded the extension, and as soon as that was done, I pushed the button and I had things flying around on my screen in swarms. So there's a lot of good code out there. It's not maybe the best for ABMs, but for managing your data and working through data pipelines, it's the thing. So.
I suspect really you should think about having not just learning one. You're going to have a couple of skills for jobs. So Python is useful for all the things you mentioned. But you might want to know Java so you can use all these libraries and things that are already out there.
Right. Well, just to push on that point, a bunch of libraries here. I guess I should have mentioned Hadoop is Java-based, right? So when I'm doing really big number crunching, I have to do some Java. I'm not as fluent in it. But. Okay. This concludes our feature presentation.
Thank you.
You're willing to stick around and talk? With that,